What if I told you that you can pay 20,000 bonds to instantly win more in World of Tanks? Would the concept 1B exist, so I guess it's true. How is it going, guys? It's Epsilon, and this replay right here is one of two, and there is 20,000 damage to be had between the two replays featured on the channel so far. And we're going to be seeing how you too can purchase this tank if you have the bonds. I mean, the amount of players with 20,000 bonds spare is probably limited, but at least you'll be able to get a good indication as to whether or not you can even take out this vehicle when you come up against it. And we're going to see the power of the concept 1B. Now, first things first, we have Redshire, which is a map that is really good for this vehicle, because primarily what you use the concept 1B with, given the fact that it does have this turret that you can see right here, is of course you want a ridgeline, and that's what we see on Redshire. Now, you're seeing here the TNH on the enemy team pushed up way too quickly within this game, and he is going to get punished quite hard. And I mean, he already has, losing over 80% of his hit points pretty much, and it's going to be a case of him just waiting to get removed by a vehicle, much like the concept 1B. Now then, having dealt with the TNH, and with the game kind of in this state of, you know, somewhat pay to win. You know, you could argue World of Tanks is pretty much pay to win in terms of being able to actually get some of the vehicles. I mean, this one in particular is a rank battle reward, but you can even purchase this tank using the bonds that you get, and of course in the quantity of 20,000. And to be able to actually get that many bonds in the game will take you hours and hours and hours, and it makes it even more annoying, I guess, for the majority of the players, because guess who's got hours and hours and hours to plow into World of Tanks? Well, it's usually the people that are the best at the game, have been playing the game the most, and so the majority of concept 1B players are typically slightly better than your average player, at least you'd expect so. But this replay is by no means a okay player. This is a very good player, and he knows everything about the concept 1B, albeit, you know, may not have the marks of excellence to show on the tank as of yet, but that doesn't really matter when you have the consistency of the concept 1B and a player that knows how to use these tanks on ridgelines. And it is a pain in the backside for the enemy team, and that's what we're going to be seeing within this. A lot of players within the game will find that the concept 1B is a struggle to come up against, and it even adds to the fact that, you know, you have to purchase this tank with bonds, which makes it more annoying as to when you get taken out by it. But hopefully you'll be able to find out the key weak points of this vehicle. There are a few, and I guess we could highlight one right here, which is the cupola on the top of the tank, and also this little bulbous bit on the top. You can also pen the turret ring of the concept 1B. We'll showcase that in a second when we've got a minute, when he's not actually just rinsing the opponents. But here you go, here's the turret ring weak point that you can hit. You do need high penetration, and also if you meet any of the side of the turret, you can pretty much deal with this vehicle quite easily. But finding the side of the turret, because of the fact that this tank also gets very balanced turret traverse, makes it very difficult. And as well as the fact that this tank is super accurate when you consider dispersion values and being able to swing around, and when you compile that with the fact that most of these players that are going to be playing the concept 1B have of course played more World of Tanks than most people, it probably has bond of equipment in it as well, adding to the fact that it's just making this tank even better. Now, you're seeing here the enemy team obviously pushing up as you'd expect. We'll open up the minimap so we can see a little bit better. Don't know why Wargaming's default is to have it as the minimum size, but you know, I guess that's what it is. But either way, you can see the enemy team pushed up as you'd expect on Redshire Assault, to the point where they're having to kind of push onto the hill area. Now, the concept's kind of got a little bit lucky for the most part. There's no tank destroyers that appear to be in this location, because there's only one in the team, or on the enemy team, and they've already been taken out. So that's really nice to see. And of course, on the ridgeline like this, he takes his first shell of damage, which you'd expect in a vehicle like this, but this kind of much into the game, and he's picked up in 4 minutes, he's picked up nearly 7,000 damage, and why don't we make it 7,400 as he pens the STA-2. And this is where this tank is just disgusting. When you get it on a ridgeline, when you get the gun constantly firing as you've been seeing in this replay, there's not really been any kind of lull period within this game where not a lot's been going on. That might change as it goes on, but I wouldn't expect so given the fact that this replay is, as you'd expect, one of the 20,000 damage combined within 2 replay games that we've got. So BZ, nice to see one of those getting taken out, or at least nearly taken out within the game. It's not often you see a BZ actually come away with having a terrible game, because even the bot players within the game can somehow come away with a decent result. Now the Type 4 on the enemy team is of course feeling the pain of coming up against a tank that is just faster and better in my opinion than the Type 4, and you're seeing the real problem with having a super heavy against something like this. And you could almost categorize the Concept 1B as a heavy medium tank, because it has the speed of, you know, some of the medium tanks in the game. Imagine something like a Centurion Action X. It's that sort of speed that allows you to get into position, and then from that position you can constantly rinse out damage on opponents. And already within this game, within just 6 and a bit minutes of the game beginning, he's already racked up 10,000 damage, and there's the game. I mean, I don't think that I've seen a faster game of World of Tanks to pick up 10,000 damage. Like, actually ridiculous. But of course, that's not the only replay. We'll take a look at the post-game stats at the end of the video, but let's jump into the next one quickly so you guys can see even more from this vehicle. Now then, the next replay is on Malinovka, and this is a map that is really well suited to a vehicle like this, because when you use gun depression on the Concept 1B, that turret weak point that we have is of course very limited in the ability to be able to get hit, and granted the first shell of course lands and connects into that turret weak point, as you can see there, but that at least highlights the fact that it can be penned and you can take this vehicle out. But you are going to have to fight at kind of close ranges. Trying to hit that from any distance is going to be a pain, and so you do have to be a brawling vehicle to be able to do that. But equally, you know, been able to trade 2 for 1 in that little engagement. Now, there is a astounding amount of the enemy team that have pushed up the hill, and this is obviously something that you typically will see on Malinovka in a losing game. A lot of the times where you go up the hill and your team don't follow you, and then you end up in this position where you're having to retreat back down the hill, or you just get absolutely compiled from this side and that side around the area here. But I digress. This replay is not going to showcase that. This is going to showcase what happens when kind of all of those things that we've just highlighted there don't happen, and you're allowed free reign within the game. And that really is a big mistake that the enemy team are going to make. And it's always good to get the Borsig and the vehicles that are going to be sniping down on the kind of tree area that you can see over here where the Borsig just got taken out, because as soon as you start cresting this ridge, what can happen is you can get hit in the side, and I mean places like where the Scorpion G are can be a real kind of counter to this position. They can get side shots on the side of your turret, which is not what you want when you're playing in this tank, because you are primarily focused on the frontal turret armor, and in no way, shape or form would you ever really be able to bounce from the side. Now remember, this is an American tank, so if they do actually hit the hull armor of this vehicle, you have quite a big chance of getting ammo-racked, and you also have a big chance of getting set on fire if they can hit your engine deck, because you know American engines and being set on fire is a common case within World of Tanks, unfortunately. But that's not going to be the case so far within the game, and you can see the power of the ridgeline of this vehicle. And like when you think of the Tornvarn, for example, at tier 8, where it's just boring for the enemy team, imagine a Tornvarn, as I'm sure many of you have come up against, and I'm sure you've come up against the Concept 1B as well, but maybe you haven't seen it from the perspective of the player of the Concept 1B, because you can do things that no other vehicle would be able to do. I mean, for example, if you're comparing this to the M103, which can poke over a ridgeline, it has the gun depression to be able to do that. But remember, the cheeks of the M103 suck. The turret armour in terms of the cupola and the top of the vehicle suck. The Concept 1B, completely different story. It gets all of the benefits of having that turret as well as no real negatives when it comes to any other aspect. And when you combine that with the fact that you do get some pretty meaty premium rounds with 310 pen at tier 9, remember, you don't really have a problem penning most things in the game. I mean, maybe you'd have a problem with the Type 5 or Type 4s that you might come up against, but even with the standard rounds, which are 258mm of pen, you can go through those too. And we're having a little bit more time within this replay to have a look at the statistics, showcase the weak points that hopefully you guys can use to your advantage when you come up against these things, because I'm sure, as I am in the game, infuriated when you see one of these things, and unfortunately not able to actually pick up one myself within the game because of the fact that I haven't played ranked battles in a long time. So maybe I have to jump in and actually spend some of the bonds that I've been saving on this vehicle, since these replays really do make me want to get the Concept. Now, what you see here is perfect use of the ridge lines. There's only a few shells taken and done 5.6 thousand damage, and you see in the consistency there's very few rounds that miss with this vehicle, and luckily you get the dual advantage of having APCR as standard and heat ammunition as premium, and then of course you get some fairly okay HE rounds that are going to help against some of the light tanks. I mean, it's not Hesh, so don't go getting your hopes up too much. It's not that overpowered to the point where it has absolutely everything, but at least, you know, you do get some HE to be able to pounce upon some of the mediums that are primarily light tanks. You know, with 53 pen, you're not going to be able to pen a massive amount of vehicles, but at least you can target them, as well as try and aim for the weak points of vehicles. I mean, if you get up from behind a lot of the heavy tanks at tier 9, maybe you'd be able to pen them with the HE, but at the end of the day, I would much rather take the standard rounds of this to be able to consistently deal damage to opponents, rather than try and get the extra 110 damage that you get with the HE. So, Type 4 has pushed way too aggressively in my opinion. Don't know why he came over. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be an awful play since he wants to get rid of the VKA, and then once the opponents have kind of got through this area, then they can kind of progress. But unfortunately for the Type 4, there were just too many vehicles to deal with all at once. Now, the enemy team have done your typical on Malinovka, where you start losing the hill, is slowly ambling their way back. But remember, as I'm sure everyone knows, the little bush wankers that are sat over here are going to be a pain in your backside if you try and poke. And I mean, where the SMV is and where the Centurion 7/1 are, you can get hit quite easily from the bushes, and there's no way of actually spotting them unless you were to get pretty lucky. Now, the Shah Futura on the enemy team obviously trying to progress against the EOC, which he does do, but fingers crossed this round can hit, and of course he ducks behind the hill. So, not looking too good in terms of encirclement and being sausage sandwiched. As I always say in World of Tanks, a sausage sandwich is fun to be on the giving end, but it's never fun to be on the receiving, because you get double pumped from either direction. So fingers crossed you don't get a sausage sandwich anytime soon. But anyway, at least we've got to see how he's got to munch through at least one side of the sausage, because you've got to deal with one flank first and then turn around and deal with the other one. But this is the perfect opportunity for the HE round, and of course it flies directly down into the tracks. Perfectly balanced, and of course not scripted whatsoever. Now, the AE phase 1, of course, out in the open, and this is really where you need to start focusing, because as soon as you start being hit from multiple angles, the Concept 1B's armour, although having blocked only a 360 this game, it is very good, but as soon as you expose yourself to more than one opponent from multiple directions, the armour gets absolutely destroyed, since you don't have any hull armour, you don't have any rear or side turret armour, and you're going to be feeling it quite badly when it comes to how the actual armour wise, and of course your hit point pool after being subjected to such things. And now then, having known that the base is being captured, there's 2 minutes and 35 seconds on the clock, and I'm sure that the enemy team are thinking, If we all get in the cap circle now, we can win this game, and unfortunately for them, maybe that won't be the case, and fortunately for us, we'll be able to see that. But having done 9,700 damage, I would be absolutely devastated to lose to cap, as I'm sure many of you will be as well. And so fingers crossed we can see him progress towards where this Char Futur was last spotted. You'd expect a vehicle like that to be sat in the bushes over here to spot anyone trying to make their way towards the cap circle, as you'd do if you were trying to actually win the game, and that way you'd be able to take them out, or at least delay them to the point where they can't get back to the cap, can't spot whatever's in the cap, and that way you win, or guarantee yourself the win. Whether or not that is the case, of course, not to be seen within this game, because for some reason no one decided to camp in this area. Would have been a good kind of counterplay, but unfortunately for the enemy team, no one taking the initiative thus far. Maybe they went back to the cap circle. Now unfortunately, the Char Futur is actually the one in the cap, and now having seen he's out there, he does indeed get shut down. Lovely to see. There are 4 vehicles on the enemy team left. There's a T10, an IS-3, an ISU-152K, and a Borsig. Now the Borsig was a one-shot, the IS-3 also a one-shot, there's the ISU that is probably either a 1 or a 2-shot, and unfortunately, so far, there is only 1 round left in the Concept 1B, which is not good whatsoever. So you are going to have to rely on your teammates, and with every World of Tanks game, as I'm sure you know, relying on your teammates is never a good thing. So fingers crossed he'll be able to at least get some support, maybe just 1, maybe 2 hits from his teammates to secure the victory. Now he's coming up from behind, trying to find out where this ISU or the Borsig is. Now he gets spotted, and that either means that the Borsig is sat up here or something like that, which is indeed the ISU. Now that's not a big problem, because the ISU is going to find it hard to pen the Concept 1B from that sort of angle with very little shots onto him, and that allows him to connect a shell. But he is out of ammunition, and there is no way for him to really do anything except for one thing, and that is of course utilising the weight of this heavy tank, or potentially utilising the cap circle. And as we've said, I hate capping in World of Tanks, but when you're in this sort of scenario, I'm not surprised that they decide he's going to make his way to the cap. Now, what's good about this position right here? Well, from the enemy's perspective, if we go into the third-person camera, you can see. Imagine coming up against a tank with a very small weak point as it is, and trying to hit their cupola. Or even just hit a module to deal damage and reset the cap. Well, you're going to see that trying to hit that, you're going to get a very slim shot into the tracks, if you could even hit that right here. And in terms of trying to hit the cupola, I mean, at this angle, which is what you should always do if you're playing the concept, is to angle your tank up, meaning that trying to hit the cupola from a level playing field is impossible, and it's always nice. Now, good thing about being in this position is he'll also spot the opponents on the enemy team for the Centurion 7/1, and the problem is that the 7/1 for some reason has decided to make his way into the base. Not ideal, but at least he's going to be able to keep him at bay and keep the T10 at bay, keep whatever it is that's going to try and YOLO into the cap kind of spotted, and hopefully the Centurion will be able to get the victory. And now then, we can take this kind of period of downturn and just being able to highlight some of the weak points as well of the concept. And one thing that we haven't already mentioned is this engine deck over here. Now, the engine deck, as with pretty much every single American tank in the game, especially the heavies, they always have these raised engines, and it's much more noticeable on the Concept 1B, because you can see the bulky area at the back here, allowing people from the front to be able to hit the engine deck and of course get a chance at setting you on fire, as well as the fact that they're going to be able to pen you from the front. Now, it's very difficult when you're looking completely frontally, but as soon as you angle, or as soon as you start turning your hull armour, it becomes the weak point, and brilliant players within the game will definitely utilise this to their advantage, and that is exactly what we're hoping to see in this game. So at this point, Centurion really does need to help because they are starting to flank, they're starting to get into a better position. The T10 is now coming towards him and it's not looking good whatsoever. The ISU is making his way and you could probably expect him to be popping up in one of these bushes over here, if not popping up on this corner, and therefore getting an easy shot into him. The only problem is that he's not going to remain undetected now, since the T10 is going to be able to proxy the concept, but fingers crossed he's going to be able to secure the victory by cap. I'm not going to say that very often on the channel, but it is probably the best way to win. And even without any rounds, the Concept 1B is still king. Now the ISU appears to have missed the Centurion or gone for the reset on the cap, and unfortunately for him, there is no way of being able to hit the Concept. Now, if you were being entirely honest, it would probably be best to try and straighten up, because you never know if he's going to be able to get a shot, but from this angle it genuinely looks impossible. The ISU is going to have to come from this direction, and well, it doesn't get time to be able to do that, and there is the win. Now I know that that was maybe a bit lackluster at the end, but that's primarily down to the fact that he did 10,000 damage and really had to carry at the end of the game without any rounds at all. No rounds, no problem, and that's exactly what this Concept 1B managed to pull off. So brilliant game from both of the players, and hopefully you've enjoyed this video. But let's have a look at the post-game stats, and of course if you don't want to watch those, I highly recommend you have a look at some of the other videos on the channel, and subscribe if you aren't already, as it massively helps out the channel, and of course will at least give me an indication as to what type of videos you want to see next. So what did the 6 minutes and 21 second replay look like? Well, of course you'd be no surprise to see the mastery badge arriving to Elders from the Voxel clan's account with 194,000 silver, so brilliant games in terms of that. 7,235 XP, obviously with boosters, Confederate medal, high caliber, 5 for effect fighter and bruiser, coming top in the game with 1,891 base experience, 4 kills, and of course being an absolute monstrosity within the game, picking up 10,431 damage, as well as assisting just slightly 567 damage. Now I blocked 1,300 and of course came away with a ton of hit points as well, so it wasn't even like he was low on hit points, but a brilliant game nonetheless, and a fantastic one to watch, even if it was such a short period of time. The next replay that we have then is, of course, played by O Baboon O from the Box 5N clan, of course an Iuxin enjoyer, and yes, the Concept 1B getting his third mark within the game, which is fantastic to see. A mastery badge, bruiser, fire for effect, Confederate, high caliber and invader, 2,690 experience, invader medal, one you very rarely see when you come out with 10,095 damage and 1,708 experience. 1 kill, maybe if he'd got a few more he would have been able to pull this over 2,000, as kills in these sorts of games really do amp up the amount of XP you get, especially if you were in a tier 10 game for example, and of course making 79,000 silver as well, picking up a decent chunk of assistance, or at least a decent chunk added on to the combined total. I mean, not that much in general, but yeah, a 14 minutes and 45 second round of World of Tanks, and a brilliant one at that. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the 20,000 bond tank, and I hope you'll see me in the next video coming soon. Goodbye.